What's up everybody and welcome to a new video. And in this video we're going to go over my notes for strings in Python. So what are strings? They are simply text data, i.e. they are a string of characters. So that's why they are called strings. And then here the next note states that strings are denoted with quotation marks, either single or double quotation marks. So for example, if I create here a variable called string1, and if I want to then create a string, I could use single quotes and then say, for example, here, hello. Or what you also can do, if I create here another variable, you could also use double quotes. So these quotes here, and then also here say hello. And then if I run this, then we get, we have created then those two variables here with these strings. And then here, I also have some side notes. The first one is that you can use one within the other. So you can use single quotes within double quotes, or you can use double quotes within single quotes. So for example, if I say here within these single quotes, I could say something like he said, colon, and then use double quotes, and then hello, exclamation mark, and then double quotes. So this doesn't throw an error if you use these double quotes within the single quotes, or you can also do the other way around. So here, for example, I could say it's a nice day. So here I'm using the single quote within the double quotes. And again, if I run the cell here, I don't get an error. So then the next side note states that strings can be empty. So for example, then here, if I delete this text in this first string, and then also in the second one here, then we have created empty strings. And if I run the cell again, we don't get an error. And then here, the last side note states that you can use triple quotes to create multi-line strings. So for example, here I have prepared some code where I don't use triple quotes. So here I just use single double quotes and try to create a multi-line string. However, if I now run this cell, then you can see that we get here a syntax error. So if you actually want to create a multi-line string, you need to use triple quotes. And here you can use either single or double quotes. So for example, if I create here a variable called string1, and now if I create triple quotes, then in this case, then now you can actually create multi-line strings. So for example, if I then say here, this is a string enter that spans multiple enter lines. And now if I lines, and if I run this now you can see that we don't get an error this time. And here, these multi-line strings they also preserve line breaks and indentation. And to show that, I've prepared another example here. So if I paste this, here you can see I have created another multi-line string where we have here, this is a list, and then here we have the different list items which are indented. And now if I run this cell, then you can see here that the indentation here is preserved. And then here, the last note for the multi-line strings is that the main use case for those are doc strings. And we talk about doc strings when we talk about the PEP8 style guide, and here more specifically about the comments, because there are different types, and here then there are doc strings. Okay, so those are the side notes that I wanted to mention, and this is how strings are denoted in Python. So then the next note is about escape characters or escape sequences. Namely, they can be used to insert characters that you couldn't insert otherwise. And the notation is that you use a backslash and then a specific character. So let's look at some examples. And the first one is if you want to insert a singular single quote or a singular double quote. In that case, then the notation is backslash and single quote, or backslash and double quote. And a potential use case for that is when you want to use both single quotes and double quotes within the same string. So for example, here I've prepared such a string. So let me paste this. So here I wrote, he said, let's go. And I used here in this case double quotes for the string. And now if I try to run this, then you can see that we get here an error. And that's because Python thinks that the string only goes from this double quote to this double quote. And then here this let is interpreted as a variable. And then here Python sees this single quote, so therefore then it thinks that here starts another string. So that's why then we get here this error. And now to get around this, we have to use here an escape character to insert a singular double quote. So therefore here we simply insert here a backslash in front of this double quote and then also in front of this one. And now if I run this, then you can see we don't get an error anymore. And this also works when you use single quotes. So here I've created the same string with single quotes. And again, if I run this, then we get a syntax error. So therefore we have to create here this escape character for the single quote. So put a backslash in front of this single quote. And now if I run this again, then we don't get an error. Okay, so that is the first example. Then the next one is a tab. So here the notation is simply backslash and then T. So to show that, let me just say here print and then hello world. And now if I print this out, then you can see here we have hello world with just a space in between those two words. However, if I now insert here a backslash and a T, then as you can see, this word here moves to the right. So a tab was inserted into this string. Then next we have here this new line character, which is denoted with a backslash and an N. So to show that, let me simply transform this T here into an N. And now if I run this, then you can see that world here is written on the next line. And here I also have a side note, namely this new line character gets automatically inserted when creating multi-line strings. So for example, here we had a multi-line string and we used this print function. However, now if I use this representation function and now if I run the cell, then you can see that here are these new line characters. Okay, so that's this side note. So then let's get to the next example, which is a backslash. So if you want to insert a backslash into a string, then you would need to use here a double backslash. And an example use case for that would be when you need many backslashes, for example, in file paths on Windows. So to show that, I've prepared here again an example. So let me print this. So here we have the string that says desktop backslash new folder backslash file.txt. And now if I try to print this, then you can see that we get here this weird string where Python thinks or interprets this backslash and then N as a new character. So therefore then here this part of the string is printed on the next line. So now if we want to insert a backslash, we simply need to put here a backslash in front of the backslash. So we need to create 2 backslashes and also here in this place. And now if I run this again, then you can see now we get our correct file path. Okay, so that's the backslash. And then the last example is the carriage return, which is denoted with a backslash and then an R. So to show that, let me go back here to this print word example. And now if I insert here this carriage return character, then what you can see is that we only get here word. So what happens is that Python prints hello, then it sees this carriage return character. So then it goes back to the beginning of the line and then it prints the rest of the string. So that's why here word has, so to say, overwritten hello. And if I here put, for example, a hi, then the result is here hello. And then here I also have an example use case for the carriage return, namely if you want to animate a progress bar. And to show that, I've prepared again here some code snippet. So here what I'm doing is I have this for loop with 10 iterations, and in each iteration I print here a pound symbol multiplied with I. So if I now just run this, then you can see it looks like this. So these pound symbols are always printed on a new line. However, if I now here go into this print function and then say that the end parameter should be actually a carriage return and not a new line, then if I now run this again, then the output now looks like this. So it always goes to the beginning of the line and then prints out the respective pound symbols. Okay, so that's the carriage return. And now that we've covered all the examples that I wanted to cover for the escape characters or escape sequences. So now let's get to the string methods. And since there are a lot of them, I've grouped them into these categories. So let's start here with the actions. And here the first method that we're going to cover is the count method. And to demonstrate that, I've prepared here again some example, which is simply a string that says hello world. And what the count method does is, as the name implies, it simply counts how often the given string appears in this string here. So for example, let's say we wanted to count how often the letter L appears here in our string. So to do that, we would then simply say words.count, and then we pass here an L. So then we get here this 3. And this count method also has some optional arguments, namely you can specify a start and also an end. And those optional arguments here, the start and end, are interpreted as in slice notation. So for example, if we say here that we should start at 0 and the end should be at 5, what that means is that we only want to look at a string here from position 0 to 5, where 5 is not included as in slice notation. So to show that, if I say here words and then 0 to 5, and if I print this out, then we get here just hello. So that's the part of the string that we are looking at. So therefore then now if I run this, then we get here a 2 because there are 2 L's here. Okay, so that's this example. And here, however, you're not only able to use just here a string with a singular character, you can also or count for strings that contain multiple characters. So for example, you can also say here words.count and then pass in the string hello, for example. So if I run this, now we get here a 1 because there's one hello in our string here. And now lastly, the last thing that I want to show is what happens when you count something that doesn't appear in this string. So for example, let's count how often the word hi appears. So therefore, let's simply say here words.count and then let's count hi. And in this case, then we get here a 0 and not, for example, an error. Okay, so that is the count method. So then the next methods are find, rfind, index, and rindex. And what you can do with those methods is to search for a substring in your string, and then the methods simply return the index where that substring starts. So to demonstrate that, I'm again using this hello world example here. So now let's say we want to index, we want to find the index of the letter L. So for example, let's say here words.find, and then we are searching for the letter L. And now if I run this, then we get here index 2, because that's the first appearance of the letter L, and that is at index 2. And here again, you have the optional arguments start and end. So for example, let's say we only want to start here, we want to start to search at position 6. So this would be here this W. So if I run this, then we get here index 9, because now it's finding this L here, which is at index 9. And here again, you can also search for, or you can pass in a substring with multiple characters. So for example, let's say here words.find hello. So if I run this, then we get here 0, because hello starts at position 0. And for example, if I pass in here word, then we get here position or index 6, because the word or the word starts here at index 6. So that's find. Then here rfind basically behaves the same. The only difference is that it starts searching from the right side. So for example, if I say here words rfind, and if I pass it an L, then now if I run this, then we get here a 9, because it starts from the right, and then here the first letter that appears, or the first L that appears, is here at index 9. So that is rfind. And then here lastly we have index. So the only difference between find and index is when you're searching or when you pass in a substring that is not within your string. So for example, let's search here for the letter Z. And here, if I then say words find and then Z, if I run this, then we get here a -1. However, if we do the same thing with index, then we get here an value error. So depending on your use case, we can then decide if we want to use find or if we want to use index. And then here lastly, rIndex, again, simply behaves the same as index, but it starts simply from the right side. So then the next methods are replace and maketrans+translate. And with those methods, you can replace a substring with another substring. So let's start here with replace. And to show that, I've again prepared here an example. So let me paste this string. So here we have the string hello world, hello universe. And now let's say we wanted to replace the hello here with a hi. So therefore, let's simply then say your words dot replace. And then we pass in first the old string. So we say hello. And then the new string that we want to replace it with, which is then here hi. And now if I run this, then you can see that we get here hi world and hi universe. And here you also have an optional argument, which is the count. So you can specify how often the specific substring should be replaced. So for example, let's say we only want to replace this first hello here. Then we would say here count equals 1. And if I now run this, then we get here hi world and hello universe. And then the last thing that I wanted to show is what happens when you try to replace a substring that is not in your original string here. So for example, let's try to replace the word hi with hello. So exactly the other way around. So therefore, let me just simply copy this cell here. And then we say here the first substring is hi and the second one is then hello. So now we try to replace hi with hello. And since there is no hi, what we get here is simply that this function then, or the method simply returns the original string. So we still have hello world and hello universe, and we also don't get an error. Okay, so that is replace. So now let's look at make trans and translate. So what you can do with that is to replace multiple characters at once. So for example, therefore I've prepared here this string. Let me just copy this and then paste it. So it's very similar to the one that we had before. Only here we have this exclamation mark and the question mark. So now let's say that we wanted to replace here this lowercase h and this lowercase h with a capital H. Then let's also say that we wanted to replace this comma here with an end. And then lastly, let's say that we also want to get rid of this question mark. So the way that we do that is to use first this maketrans method to create a translation table, so to say. So therefore then we say table equals and then words dot make trans. And then here we pass in a dictionary, which then contains our translation table. So here's this dictionary where we replace lowercase h with a capital H, the comma with an end, and then here the question mark with a none. And then let me also print out this table to see what that looks like. So this is what this table then looks like. And now we can use this table to make our translations. So then we simply say words.translate, and then we pass in here our table. And now if I run this, then you can see we get here hello world and hello universe, and the question mark here now is gone. And then here I also have a side note. Namely, the side note states that the keys in the dictionary must be single characters. So for example, let's say here we try to replace hello with a lowercase h with hello with an uppercase or with a capital H. Then we get here this error which says, or this value error which says that string keys in translate table must be of length 1. Okay, so that is the side note, and with that we've covered these two methods here. Then the next method is the join method. And with that, you can join together multiple strings from an iterable. So to show that, I've prepared here this variable, which is called animals. And this is simply a list that contains strings with animals. So dog, cat, and bird. And now let's say that we want to join those strings here together. So therefore, we first have to specify the string that we want to join them on. So in our case, let's say we just want to join them with a space. And then we say dot join, and then we pass in our iterable. So in our case, let's send this animals variable. And now if I run this, then you can see that those strings are now joined together with a space in between them. So what you also could do here, for example, is put a comma between those. So if I say here comma space, then we get this result here where we have those strings separated by commas. And a last example that I wanted to show is just here, for example, to use a forward slash. And now if I run this, then we have our strings here joined together with this forward slash. So that's the join method. Then the next methods are split, rsplit, and splitlines. And split is basically the opposite of join. Namely, with that you can split a string into substrings, which are then returned as a list. So to show that, I've prepared this example here. So here we have a string which contains the words dog, cat, and bird. And now let's say that we want to split this string into those separate words here. So therefore we can use the split method. So let's simply say animals dot split. And now if I run this, then you can see we get here this list containing the individual words. So we have 3 strings. The first one is dog, and then the comma, cat, comma, and then here we have bird. So by default, the split method splits the string based on the spaces here. However, you can also specify what the separator should be. So for example, let's say that we want to split the string based here on the commas. So therefore, let's copy this cell. And then here, let's simply specify a comma as the separator. And then we get the following result. Again, we have three strings. The first one is dog. The second one is then a space with cat, and then space bird. So this is how split basically works. But here you also have an optional parameter, namely the parameter is this max split parameter, with which you can define the maximum number of splits that should be applied. So for example, let's say that we only want to have one split. So then we would pass in here a 1. And now if I run this, then we get here 2 strings. The first one contains dog, and the second one then contains cat, comma, bird. So this is how split works. Then rsplit basically behaves the same. The only difference is that it starts splitting the string from the right side. So for example, to show that, let me copy this cell, and then here let's use rsplit. And now if I run this, then we get the following result where the second string only contains then the bird, and that's because, as I said, rsplit starts splitting from the right. And then here the first string contains dog and cat. So this is how split and rsplit work. And here I've also have a side note, namely the split values can also be empty strings. So to show that, what we're going to do is we're going to split the string based on this bird here, for example. So let's use that as the separator. So now if I run this, then we get here the following result, namely the first string contains dog and cat, and then the second string here is then an empty string, and that's because the separator here, after the separator, there's nothing else in the string, so that's why then we get here this empty string. Okay, so that's this side note. Then now let's get to split lines, and to demonstrate that I've prepared this example. So here we have a multi-line string, and now if I use the split method on that multi-line string, then we get the following result. So here we have a list with all the individual words. However, let's say that we don't want those individual words, but instead we want to have the separate lines here. And that's where we can use, that's what we can use split lines for. So for example, then if I say text.splitlines, and now if I run this, then you can see now we have a list with those individual lines. So here a string that says hello world and a string that says how are you. So this is how split lines work. And here I've also have a side note, which says that split lines can also be done via the split method. So we can also achieve the same result here with the split method, and therefore we simply pass in the new line character that we have seen before here with the escape characters. And if we use that, then we can also get here the same result where we have those two separate lines. Okay, so that are my examples for split and split lines. Then next we have partition and rpartition. And partition is similar to split, namely with it we can partition a string based on a separator. So to show that, I've prepared this example here. It's an example string where we have animals, colon, and then dog, cat, bird. And now let's say that we want to partition the string based on this colon here. So we want to access everything that is before the colon and everything that is after the colon. So therefore we can use partition. So here then we simply say words partition, and then we specify a separator. And as I said, we want to have the colon. And then we get here this result where we have a tuple with 3 entries. So the first one is everything before the separator, then we get here the separator, and then everything that is after the separator. So this is how partition works. And rpartition again simply starts partitioning the string from the right side. So for example, if we partition here the string on D, then we get this result. So we have animals, colon, then the separator is D, and then here the third entry is dog, cat, and bird. And now if we use rpartition, then we get the following result. Namely, the first string here is animals, dog, cat, bird. Then we have here the separator D, and then here at the end we have an empty string. So this is how partition and rpartition work. Then the next methods are strip, lstrip, and rstrip. And with those you can strip leading or trailing characters from a string. So to show that, I've prepared this example string here. So here we have hello world, and here there's also some leading and trailing white space. So now let's say we want to get rid of that, and therefore we can use the split method, the strip method. So let's say here words.strip. And now if I run this, then you can see that we've got rid of the leading and trailing white space. However, the white space in the middle is still there. So the strip method only works on the leading or trailing characters. And if you only want to strip, for example, the leading white space, then you can use lstrip. So if I say here words.lstrip, then the result looks like this. So we still have the trailing white space. Or if you want to only get rid of the trailing white space, then you can use rstrip. So let's copy the cell here, and then here simply use r. Then we get rid of the trailing white space, but not the leading white space. So this is how strip works by default. So by default, it's stripping white space, but you can also strip away specific characters. So therefore, I've prepared this example. So to show that, here we have the string spam, hello, spam, world, and then here again spam. So now let's say that we want to get rid of this leading and trailing spam here. So therefore, then we again use strip, words.strip. And now we want to specify what characters we want to strip. So in our case, then let's say here spam. And now if I run this, then you can see that we get rid of the leading or trailing spam. And again, it only gets rid of the leading or trailing spam and not the spam here in the middle. And here, just as a side note, strip actually doesn't look for this entire word, but it only looks at the specific characters. So for example, what we also could do is here simply specify here the characters that we want to strip away. So for example, if I use here P, A, and the capital S and M, then we get here the same result. Okay, so this is how strip, lstrip, and rstrip work. Then the next methods are removeprefix and removesuffix. And removeprefix basically behaves like lstrip, and removesuffix basically behaves like rstrip. So again, to show that, we can use actually this example here. So here then let's simply say words remove prefix and then spam. So now if I run this, then we get this result where here the spam at the beginning is removed. However, a difference to the strip methods is that removeprefix actually looks for this exact string here. So for example, if we then use removeprefix for the second string here, then we get the following result, namely the spam here at the beginning is not deleted or removed because removeprefix is actually looking for this exact string and not just those specific characters. And the same thing then also applies to removesuffix. So if I remove the suffix, then here again we can see that the spam at the end is removed. And if I do the same thing here for this string, then you can see that it's again not removed. Okay, so this is how removeprefix and removesuffix work. Then the next methods are format and format map. And as the name implies, with those you can format a string. So to show that, I've prepared the following example. So let me paste this. So here I have a variable called nProduct and it's set to 4. And then here I have the string which contains these curly braces here, which act as a placeholder. And then I say here dot format, and then I pass in our nProducts. So now if I run this, then you can see that this 4 here is inserted into those placeholders. So then it says there are 4 products in the shopping cart. And if I say, for example, 5, then it says there are 5 products in the shopping cart. So this is how you can use the format method. However, it's generally recommended to use f-strings instead. And we talk about f-strings then in the next video. And then the last method is called expandtabs. And as the name implies, this simply expands the tabs in the given string. So to show that, I've prepared this string here. So here we have hello world. So hello and then a tab and then word. And if we print this out here in this notebook, then it looks like this. And now, however, if I use this expandtabs method, then the string then looks like this, where our word is a little bit shifted to the right. So this is how expandtabs works. And here I have also a side note, namely expandtabs doesn't simply replace the tabs with the specified number of spaces. And to show you what I mean by that, I have prepared here these print statements where I've specified different tab sizes, so tab size 4, 6, and 8. And now if I run this, then you can see that the output here looks like this. So as you can see, expandtabs doesn't simply replace the tabs with the specified number of spaces, because if that were the case, then here we would have 4 spaces, then here we would have 6 spaces, and here we would have 8 spaces. However, this is not an error, because this is actually how tabs work. Namely, they, so to say, specify fixed starting points. So for example, when you have the tab size 4, then the fixed starting points are 0, 4, 8, and so on. And then here in our string, the word world comes after this tab. So that means when we specify a tab size of 4, that means then that world here has to start at one of those fixed starting points. So it has to start at either 0, 4, or 8, and so on. And obviously it can't start at 0, because that's where hello starts. So here at position 0, hello starts. So that's why world can start there. Then it can also not start at position 4, because hello has 5 letters. So it's not finished yet. So at this position here. So therefore then it has to start at position 8. So that's why you can see that here world is a little bit shifted to the right. And then here for tab size 6, the fixed starting points are then obviously 0 and 6. And again, it can't start at 0 or at position 0, because that's where hello starts. So therefore then it has to start at position 6. That's why then world here is a little bit shifted to the left compared to the tab size 4 and 8. And then lastly here for tab size 8, the fixed starting points are 0 and 8. So therefore then we have again the world at this position, because it can't obviously start at position 0. Okay, so this is the side note here. And with that now we've covered expandtabs. And with that then we've covered all the methods in this actions category here. Then the next category is called alignment. And here the first methods that we have are ljust, rjust, and center. And what you can do with those methods is to specify a string to be a certain length, and then you can justify the word within that string either to the left, to the right, or to the center. So to show that, let me here create a variable called word, and let's say the string should be hello. And now let's use ljust. So we're going to say word.ljust. And now we need to specify what length the resulting string should be. So let's say it should be or should have 7 characters. And now if I run this, then you can see that our string here has 7 characters and the word hello is justified to the left. And you can also justify it to the right. So therefore let's simply say rjust, and then again 7 characters. Then we have here the word justified to the right, and you can also justify it to the center. So let's say here word.center, and then again 7 characters. And now here hello is justified to the center. So that's the basic use of those methods. However, you can also specify a fill character. So instead of having here just spaces, you can have whatever character you want. So for example, let's say that we want to have here a dot. So then if I run this, then you can see here that we get 2 dots instead of 2 spaces. Okay, so that is ljust, rjust, and center. And then here zfill. This is basically similar to ljust. The only difference is that it fills up the string with zeros. So to show that, let's create here a variable called number, and let's make this a 1. And now let's use this method, so number.zfill. And then again, we have to specify what length the given or the resulting string should have. So let's say it should be or should have 5 characters. And now if I run this, then you can see here our string has 5 characters. The 1 is here on the right, and the string is filled up here with zeros. Okay, so with that, we've already covered all the methods in this alignment category. Then the next category is called cases. And as the name implies, with all these methods, what you can do is change the case of a given string. So to show that, I've prepared here again an example. So this is a variable called words, and it says hello world. So now let's use this upper method here. So if I say words.upper, then what you can see is that all the characters in the string are transformed to uppercase. If I say here words.lower, then all the characters are transformed to lowercase. And then here with respect to this casefold method, I have some notes. Namely, it is similar to lower, but it's stronger and helps with changing letters to lowercase in other languages. So for example, if I say here words.casefold, then as you can see, we get the same result as with lower. However, for example, I have here a keyboard with a German layout, and we have here, for example, this special character. And if I use the lower method on that, what we get is simply, again, this character. However, if I do that with the lower case, with the casefold method, then what you can see is that we actually get here 2 lowercase s's. So here in this case, then we have a difference between those 2 methods here. Okay, so that were the first 3 methods. Then here we have capitalize and title. So to show that, let me just delete those cells here. And then here in the string, let me make this a lowercase h, and then here also this one a lowercase w. So now if I use the capitalize method, then as you can see, what happens is that only the first letter of the string is capitalized. However, if I use the title method, then the first letter of every word gets capitalized. Okay, so that are those 2 methods. And then lastly, we have here this swapcase method. Therefore, again, let me here just delete those cells. And here, let me undo those changes. So let's have again a capital H and a capital W. And now if I say words.swapcase, then what happens is, as you can see, that those uppercase letters here, they get transformed into lowercase, and all the lowercase letters in our original string, they get transformed into uppercase letters. Okay, so with that, we've already covered all the methods here in this cases category. Then the next category is called checks, and here we have methods with which we can check for various things. So for example, with those first three methods here, we can check if a string is lowercase, uppercase, or title case. So to show that, let's again use here our hello world example. So here then, if we say words is lower, then we get here a false. If we say words is upper, then we also get a false. And if we say word start is title, then we get here actually a true. Okay, so that were the first methods here. Then next here we have isalnum. So with that you can check if a string consists only of alphabetical characters or numerical characters. So to show that, I've prepared here this variable. So here year 2026. And now here, if we say words is isnum, then we get a true. However, if I, for example, insert here a space, then we actually get here a false. Then next we have isalpha. So this simply checks if the string only consists of alphabetical characters. So for example, if we can make this here year 2026, and then here say is alpha, then we get a false because we have here these numbers. However, if I delete them, then we actually here now get a true. Then next we have here those three methods, isnumeric, isdigit, or isdecimal, and all of these methods check if a string only consists of numerical characters. So for example, let's undo our this change here so that we have again year 2026. And now if I say here is numeric, then we get a false. If I say words dot is digit, then we also get a false. And if I say words dot is decimal, then again we get here a false. However, if I delete here the year, then you can see that we get here true for all those methods. And if you want to know what the difference between those is, then you can check out here this reference link. Okay, so next now we have starts with and ends with. So as the name implies, those check if a string starts with or ends with the given string. So to show that, I've prepared this example here, hello world, hi universe. So now if we say here, for example, words starts with and then hi, then we get here a false because the string doesn't start with hi. However, what we also can do is we can specify multiple strings to search for. So for example, if I say here again, word starts with and then put in here a tuple, and then in that tuple say hi or hello, then here we actually get a true. So this is the basic use. However, there are also some optional arguments, for example, here start and end. So we can specify where we want to start here in this string. So for example, if I say then here 13, so that's where this hi here starts. That's why then we get here also a true. Okay, so that are those two methods. Then next we have here a space. So this simply checks if the characters in the string are spaces. So to show that, I've prepared this string here. So here we have a string with a space. Then here we have a tab. Then here a new line character. And then here lastly a carriage return. So if I create that and then say string is space, then as you can see here, we now get a true. However, if I am, for example, make this here an empty string, then in this case, then we get a false. So that's is space. And lastly, then we have here is printable. So this simply checks if the characters in the string are printable. So therefore, to show that, I've prepared this example. So here I simply say hello world and then is printable. And now if I run this, then you can see that this is true. And now I just want to show some more examples. So for example, let's see what happens if we have an empty string. So let's say an empty string is printable, and now let's run this. And again, we get a true. Now let's see what happens when we have a space. So let's also say space is printable. And now if I run this, we again get a true. And now let's see what happens when we have this special character here with the tab. So let's see if a tab is printable. And then again, here you can see this is not printable. And then the last example that I want to show is the new line character. So let's again here use backspace and then n. And then let's check if this is printable. So now here you can see this is also not printable. Okay, so with that now we've covered all those methods here in this checks category. So then let's get to the last category, which I called computer science. And here the first method is called isascii. So this simply checks if the given or if the characters in the given string are only ASCII characters. And ASCII stands for American Standard Code for Information Interchange. So now to demonstrate that, let me create here a string which is simply an A. And then we're going to say, is this ASCII? And if I run this, then you can see that it is true. However, if I again use here the special German character and then say is ASCII, then we get here a false. Okay, so that's this first method here in this computer science category. Then next we have here encode. And what that does is it converts a Unicode string into a bytes object using a specified encoding. So for example, if I use this here on this A, if I say a.encode, then we get this as a return value. And if I say here on our special character encode, then we get this as the return value. Okay, so this is encode. And then lastly, we have here isidentifier. So what that does is it checks if a string is a valid identifier, i.e. it checks if it follows naming conventions. And we talk about these naming conventions here when we talk about the PEP8 style guide. Namely here we have then naming conventions. But now just to quickly show that here, I've prepared again some variables. So let's paste those. So here we have variable 1 and variable 2. Variable 1 is num_1 and variable 2 is then here 1_num. And now if I say variable 1 and then is identifier, then we get here a true. So this is a valid identifier. However, if I say variable 2 and then is identifier, then we get here a false. So this is not a valid identifier because it starts here with this number. Okay, so with that now we've already covered all the methods here in this computer science category. So with that now we've covered all the string methods that are available. And with that then we've covered all the nodes that I want to cover with respect to strings in Python. So then in the next video, we're going to start to go over my nodes for raw strings and f strings. So thanks for watching and hopefully I will see you in the next video.